The fact that you could say, no, men cannot give birth, and that's a controversial statement, says all you need to know about where we are. But folks, we need you to get off the sidelines and in the trenches.
That's the voice of Virginia's Attorney General Jason Miyares giving a stirring message on why America and the Judeo-Christian principles we were founded upon are worth fighting for. Plus, we get Victoria's take on Kamala Harris's new running mate, as well as an update on the Richmond City Council's sweetheart deal with a Planned Parenthood clinic. Welcome to Speak Up Virginia, equipping you to speak up on the life, family, and freedom issues that matter most to you. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you with us for Speak Up Virginia. You know, we've missed you, Victoria, for the last couple of weeks. Glad to have you back.
Yeah, glad to be back. I had a speaking engagement at a conference, SoConCon, which is a great gathering of social conservatives. It was super fun. And then, I took a little family vacation to the beach because 'tis the season.
All right. Well, I'm glad to have you here because there's things we want to pick your brain on.
Okay.
Particularly Kamala Harris's new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
Yeah, so this has been fun to watch. Certainly.
Tim Walz. I got to say that right.
You're right. Yeah. I guess how to say it is also it's a learning curve with every new candidate. Like we had to learn how to say Kamala. We've had to learn, I'm sure a lot of folks didn't know Jason Miyares that we're going to talk about later, when you pronounce that one. So yeah. But it is interesting to learn about these guys. I think he's been on the radar for conservatives around the country for a while because he is so extreme despite what they're saying about him. That's what's I think interesting is when they get introduced and the mainstream media is trying to make them something that everybody wants, right? Because they're on board with let's get the Democrats elected. They introduce them, but it's not the way we've known him.
It has been fascinating to watch this entire remake of both Kamala and this governor.
Yeah, I mean, the reality, let's start with the reality, and then let's talk about what they're saying about this guy. So the reality is this is the governor of the state that the moment that Dobbs overturned Roe, this state was like the first to run out and basically put in a constitutional right to unfettered abortion. I mean, just no holds bar. And he's also the governor that oversaw basically putting in a law that not only allows puberty blockers and allows this trans agenda to move forward, but really creates a sanctuary state of sorts in Minnesota where, basically if you want to bring your kid to Minnesota because your state says this is harmful to kids, have at it.
Yeah, we are talking about invasive surgery on children. It's not just the puberty blockers that they've
the
created.
Surgery, any of it.
He's created a sanctuary for that and said, if kids can be taken to our state for these invasive surgeries.
I can't even imagine wanting your state to be known that way, to try to create tourism around that. I mean, it reminds me of, abortion tourism, and we've talked about that with Virginia, but it's just the idea that governors think this is, a national crisis they need to solve in all the wrong ways is devastating.
That's what they're focusing on, especially since we've seen the criticism where he was really slow to react while his cities were burning.
We haven't even talked about that. Yeah. 4 days he left his city burning because he was sympathetic to BLM. And I mean, that needs to be accounted for when we're talking about who this guy is. But that's not how the media is portraying. They're describing him as folksy. He's like everybody's grandpa or something.
I am going to put a picture on the screen here of the police station that they let just be attacked. And it still has not recovered to this day. I think it's still empty. So I'm going to see if we can get a picture up of that.
Yeah.
But also what you're saying, this fascinating remake we're watching in real time where the word of the day is folksy. He is just your friendly, neighborly, folksy person. So if you pay attention, you will probably have seen, I heard it first on a Washington Post podcast.
Yes.
You will have seen the word folksy and Tim Walz together 50 times.
And they go even further, this neighborly thing. So it goes folksy and then neighborly. You're hearing those two words most associated with them. And they go even further to basically describe all the, I would argue, very progressive, very government-heavy programs that he's created as, he's just the guy that loves his neighbor, right? And so, again, they're also reframing, ultimately, sort of the step into socialism as, this guy's just neighborly. He fed all the children, and he, how did he do that? Well, because he believes in sort of this redistribution of wealth. I mean, that's fundamentally what's happening there.
And it's tragic when you think about it, using the word neighborly when you're making your state both a sanctuary state for unlimited abortion and transgender surgery.
Yeah, I don't find that neighborly. I want my neighbors to not interfere with my parental rights. So no, that's not neighborly.
All right. Well, as far as the narrative that these two individuals are just like your normal down-home
Everyday Americans.
everyday neighbor next door, I just want to play a couple of clips here for you to make up your own mind. We're just going to run these real quick and leave these out there.
Don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness.
You have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke. Yeah.
All right, Victoria, I'm going to let you have this one.
All right. Well, I have to comment on the Kamala one because that's gotten a lot of play. And it's not just what she's saying. Of course, we totally disagree with you got to stay woke because we know what that means. That means you got to push DEI everywhere. That means we know what the programmatic side of what she's actually saying is. But also just her delivery, there's something that I can't explain it, but there's something about how she conveys these ideas that is really grating.
I mean, it's her liberalism and the word salad
it's
all
both.
together.
Yes, it is the ideas
it's a classic.
And the way she brings them forward. Like, they're all so happy, funny, except she's conveying some really bad things.
Yeah. Well, how about his version of neighborliness is socialism. Socialism is just another form of neighborliness.
That's the thing. That's what clearly that's his view. I don't think we can look at other places where socialism has run and been pervasive, and I don't think people would be like, oh yeah, this is great. We're just happy neighbors. No, that's not how socialism really plays out in the real world.
No, it doesn't. It
harmful.
Leads to the deaths of millions of people.
Yes.
Okay. So why did she pick someone, do you think? There's been speculation around she didn't try to balance herself out because we know she's coming from woke California. She's pretty much a socialist herself, I think. And so why would you pick another socialist on the ticket instead of trying to do someone that's going to balance out yourself more and maybe, like Pennsylvania voters and things like that?
Well, one thing that doesn't get talked about enough in this is a real human being who's picking who they want to work with for the next 4 years. So that never gets talked about, which is like they want someone like themselves. They want someone with that same ideology. They want sort of a match. Trump did that largely on his VP pick. Mm-hmm. So we always talk about which person brings the most to the table to win the election, but they can't help but have in the back of their mind also, I want my ideas totally reinforced. I want the same kind of thinking in that. But there is a real concern and a lot of talk about why she didn't choose Joshua Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who I think a lot of folks thought brought a lot more to the table. He is certainly far left enough, we would say, on almost everything. But the reality is Pennsylvania would have brought, if you bring the governor of Pennsylvania, you're securing that state. That's how people felt. Like, this was the smartest move she could have made from an electoral map perspective. But the discussion of why she didn't pick Joshua Shapiro is really revealing about the Democratic base. And there are truly a large quotient. I shouldn't say large. I don't know how big the percentage is, but there are a number of people that are Hamas sympathizers. And you cannot get around that. The protests reveal that. And the Democrats have to have those people at the ballot box to win the election. They have to have all of their base. Yeah. And what I need to say is Josh Shapiro is Jewish. And it appears that was a real problem. And the idea that racism in any way played a part in the VP pick is devastating. And it's hard to quantify it, but we all know it was there because we've watched the protests. We know what the base looks like. We know the formula.
So do you think she is counting on the media to kind of whitewash this radical pick and appeal to these people in her base that are more radical, a lot of them pro-Hamas, some of the campus people out there are pro-Hamas? Is she kind of trying to have it both ways that way?
I think there's no question that the Democrats know they can rely on the media to create a narrative, to reframe a human being and make them look the way they want to. The moment J.D. Vance went out, weird is all we heard. It was like this talking points went out that he's somehow weird, which honestly, I don't think that many people find him very weird. He's pretty typical, like American male guy. But they had a way they wanted to frame him. And so she's counting on all of that. It doesn't matter who she picks. She can pick who she wants, and they're going to bring it along.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I think saying socialism is neighborly is the definition of weird. That I'm just going to go on the record with that.
It used to be that would be so extreme that would have I mean, any connection to socialism would have wiped out your ability to be in office. But this was Bernie Sanders' pick. We can't ignore it. This is who Bernie Sanders wanted. We know what Bernie Sanders believes. And so I think the fact that that is now becoming more mainstream, look out. We are headed down a scary path. What does that say about the electorate?
People really need to not go by personality in these elections and look at the actual policy stances.
We'd love to have all of our people who are in office be people we want to hang out with, people we want our kids to look up to. We would all love that. But the bottom line is the number one thing they do is policy that affects your life and military decisions and all of these things. So we have to kind of the adjectives, it's funny that, weird for the Republican and folksy for the Democrat.
We're not talking about policy.
Right. We're not talking about the issues. I think it's all a dodge because if we talk about the issues, what people are going to be worried about is the economy. They're going to be worried about crime. They're going to be worried about the border. And those things all lean in the direction of choosing more the Republican ticket, and that can't happen. So we're going to talk about personalities and weirdness.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to make a hard subject change here because I know a lot of our listeners really want to hear about what's going on with the Richmond City Council essentially giving a building away for all practical purposes to Planned Parenthood. Now, I should mention we didn't even talk about that we are going to have a special treat today with a talk from the Attorney General. Yes. So I do need to mention we're about to give you that. It's just a short talk from him that is both humorous and very convicting. But I did want to get your take on a quick update on what is happening with the Richmond City Council and Planned Parenthood right now.
Yeah, you just never know what's going to pop up, in the landscape of the abortion industry. And really what they're trying to do is stand up all sorts of new clinics. This is not the only one they've stood up recently. I think they think there's a post-Dobbs world, where Virginia is protecting abortion access instead of protecting human beings. And so they have the ability to get in there and set up clinics. And they can find liberal government actors who will help them along. We know that because we pay taxpayer dollars that end up in the hands of the abortion industry. So we've got this city council, and they basically, thankfully, we heard about it a little bit before it happened, but barely, where basically they made a deal and sold a building, and it hasn't closed yet, but they voted to sell a building to Planned Parenthood for $10. Now, this building has a value of $1.4 million. There are around it adequate businesses, so you know that a business could succeed there. It is not considered a blighted property. That's important for sort of state law. If it were blighted, you can do different things. You can sort of undervalue it and that kind of thing. But what they did is they sort of all in one motion said, this is the city's version is what they call surplus. We're going to call it surplus, and then we're going to give it to Planned Parenthood for $10. And so obviously we had great folks turn out for the city council meeting trying to testify against this, that not only is it just a violation for a taxpayer to know that you're going to get, that $1.4 million of value that they could get. This is when they scream, they cry broke all the time. They're going to, they raise your taxes all the time, but then they give away buildings that they could have revenue, right? So taxpayers are rightly aggravated, whether it's abortion or not. But then you also have all these ministries and other outreaches that are needed in that area that would have loved to have a shot at this building. I mean, the homeless ministries and homes for pregnant women, they also, drug addiction, all of that is the area where this building has great need. And any of those type of nonprofits would have loved to have that building, but they got no shot at it. And so our Founding Freedoms Law Center is looking at, and we told the city council before they voted, look, you should expect to be sued. And we are looking at, who else would have wanted that building that didn't get a shot at it, that was boxed out of, and we would argue, a non-just, not legal process.
Maybe people doing actual education for children, or maybe other pregnancy resource centers with like a $10 deal.
I mean, the mental health issue in that area. There are providers of all sorts of services that if you could have a crack at being right there where there are real difficulties in the city and have basically a free building, and just all the money you have to spend is just to renovate the building, that'd be amazing.
Now, there are already abortion clinics in the city, right?
This is the thing, too. This will be the 5th abortion clinic. Articles are talking about it as the 3rd. It's the 3rd owned by Planned Parenthood, but it is the 5th total clinic in just the city of Richmond. So that's not just the state of Virginia. That's just our city. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about how serious they are about increasing the abortion profit.
And I think I read somewhere that they are saying this is going to be subsidized in some way, like some of the services. Am I correct on that?
I haven't dug into that. But again, the entire operation of Planned Parenthood is subsidized by taxpayer funding. Yes, taxpayers might not directly pay for an actual abortion, but if we keep the lights on, we pay for all the, contraceptives they hand out, all the other things they do, and the city hands them a building, every dollar they get from the abortion can be straight profit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling.
And I'll just mention one other thing. It's not just abortions.
Let's talk about the other thing that Planned Parenthood does.
That.
So Planned Parenthood, as you probably know, are aware that they are also very much in the business of gender transition. So they are very much handing out puberty blockers and trying to help these kids move from their biological sex. So they are ruining lives, taking lives and ruining other lives. And so it's like they're actually just we'll just call it, they're in the sterilization business. We're going to take human life and we're going to make sure that, people literally for the rest of their lives are down a path where they will not be able to have their own children. I mean, it's devastating.
Is there anything people can do if they want to support what we're doing, these legal efforts that we're involved in? How can they lend support to this effort right now?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is any businesses in the Richmond area that would have wanted that building ought to contact our law center, because I think we're going to have, some plaintiffs that want to step forward with a lawsuit. So I think that's the first thing is if you have a ministry or would have loved to have had a $1.4 million building right there in the heart of the city, let us know. And then also just undergirding both with prayer and finances, the work that our law center is going to do to fight this thing. The reality is it's just, our law center is donation covered. So all the legal time they put into that is because of our great supporters. So just anything that people can do to help there, and then praying about this. I mean, this is just one more example. So this is an overall issue of this great desire to increase abortion. There was an article just this week that said abortion has risen from 2,000 a month to 3,500 in Virginia. So this is post-Dobbs. So we are really talking about a dramatic uptick of human life being taken. And a lot of it is by standing up new abortion centers and really sort of planting this idea that there's one in every neighborhood and it's no big deal, and just more lies to women. So
all right, we're gonna put the URL here on the screen, but it's founding freedoms. Wait, give me
foundingfreedomslaw.org. Yeah,
Founding Freedoms.
You can
Law.
Also get to it through the Family Foundation website if for some reason that's
foundingfreedomslaw.org. Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So we're gonna put that on the URL for our on the screen for our YouTube viewers, and I just think all this is a great example why we can't just sit on the sidelines. We've got to get engaged. We just can't shut our eyes to all that's happening here with actual lives being lost. And that gets me into this great talk that our Attorney General gave, where he talked about this theme that we've got to get in the trenches here, get in it with us, with the Family Foundation. We can't be doing this alone. You guys are, all of you, each and every one of you are the foundation of the Family Foundation. Mm-hmm. And so the Attorney General talks about that. And, last week we talked about how this talk was given at our sister organization, Family Foundation Action. Tell us a little bit about that in the context of it.
Yeah, so this is the part of our work done through an organization, the Family Foundation Action, that is election related, that is really about making sure that conservatives understand who the candidates are and that they are mobilized and energized to come out at the ballot box. And so they have events in addition to the Family Foundation having events. And so the Attorney General was brought in for an event around raising funds for them. So
yeah. So last week you heard Ambassador Kim Blackwell out of that event, and this is part two. We're bringing you the portion that featured the Attorney General, Jason Miyares, as the part two part of that. So if you can just give us a quick idea, a little bit more about the Attorney General as we head into listening to this.
I mean, of course, we're thrilled that our Attorney General has been a guy that not only promised that he was going to get into office and do some really great conservative things, but has followed up with that. So he immediately put us on the right side of the Dobbs decision. So he came in just as that was in front of the Supreme Court. And just a number of things. Of late, he and the governor have been working on making sure voter rolls are actually cleaned up. That's been a passion point for a lot of folks. So anyway, we're thrilled that we're able to be in a Commonwealth where you've got an Attorney General that understands law and order and is seeking to preserve the rights of parents and religious freedom and all of those things. So yeah, we're...
Now, I do want to mention at the time that this talk was given, Biden had not yet announced that he was not going to run again.
Sure, yes.
So I think it's safe that we can just transpose where he's giving warnings about what the administration is going to be doing in the future. We can transpose those warnings for what the Kamala Harris administration might look like.
We've seen
in the
no
future.
daylight between the two. So we've never seen a case where it's like Biden's on board for something and we think Kamala wouldn't be. So yes, when we talk about the Biden administration and a future Biden administration in this case, because we didn't know he wasn't going to run, you're talking about the same thing.
All right. So without further ado, we bring you Attorney General Miyares.
The left is indeed relentless. They will pull every lever of power possible to fundamentally change society. This is the Biden administration. Now, he says what he wants to do. And I sometimes say, the best part of Joe Biden's day is that every day he gets to wake up and discover he's the president of the United States. But we know what he wants to do because we've seen it, right? I see it through what he does through executive orders. And, I like to say I get to wake up in the morning and sue the Biden administration. Business is booming, folks. But to give you an idea of how they work, I remember my staff comes in and they usually update me every week about new federal regs that we may have to take to court and impose. And I remember my staff came in and said, listen, I think we're going to have to sue the USDA. And I got to be honest, of all the federal agencies, that's not one we normally engage in lawsuits over. Why would we do that? I said, well, the USDA administers the school lunch program for our public schools for underprivileged kids. And I said, well, I don't have a problem with that. Why would we sue over that? He said, well, it's what they're doing with the money. They're saying if you're a school district and you accept so much as a dime of federal money for underprivileged kids, you have to adopt the Biden administration's transgender policy on biological women in women's sports and in locker rooms and in bathrooms. This would affect over 90% of the school districts around the country. Not a vote through Congress, not a debate on the floor, executive fiat. So we banded together some other like-minded AGs and we said, listen, this proposed regulation, if you try to implement it, we're going to take you in court, we're going to beat you in court, and they withdrew the regs. But listen, you have to be forever watchful of what they're doing, right? They use OSHA to do this vaccine mandate. Remember that? Yep. You got to get your employees vaccinated or they have to be fired. So one of the first things we did in Virginia is we took them all the way to the Supreme Court. But that's the way the left often works. And we see that at the state level. I'm here today in many ways because of the incredible work of so many people in this room, but also because of the incredible work of what the Family Foundation did for the entire ticket in 2021. And it was a hard decision for me to run because I like to joke that I married my wife for a reason. She's my best friend. I didn't want to necessarily campaign. I ultimately felt called by the Lord to run. But I remember on election night when the results were coming in, one of my political advisors says, hey, if we pull this off, you'd be the first candidate to defeat an incumbent Attorney General in Virginia since 1885. And I just said, I am so glad I did not know that. But they were literally in the trenches from the beginning because they know what's at stake. I joke with the governor that he doesn't realize it, but he did a DNA test. He's really Italian. His real name is Don Vito because of the numerous vetoes he's having to do. But it would transform Virginia. We like to say, don't California our Virginia. Listen, Mark and two great delegates here, Mark Early and Dave Owens, they know that. They see bill after bill after bill that would fundamentally transform who we are as a people. And I cannot tell you that the stakes are so high and why individuals have to get off the sidelines. I've referenced that this is a national sovereignty election. I stopped saying this is the most important election because you've heard it too many times. What I'm trying to tell groups is the very sovereignty of us as a nation is at stake. Since Biden has taken office, 8 million illegals across the border. That's larger than the population of 32 states. 83% of who's apprehended, they give the equivalent of a parking ticket or a speeding ticket and say, we'll see you in court in 2028 or 2029. That's your asylum here. It's literally a catch and release program. 240 individuals on the FBI terrorist watch list have been apprehended. 240. How many have gotten through? I don't know. Probably double that number of who's gotten through. You know how many were apprehended at the border in the last year of the Trump administration? 6. 6. 24,000 Chinese national males of military age have been apprehended at the border. 24,000. So we have individuals that are coming to their country that don't like us. And ask yourself, if you are on the FBI terrorist watch list, why would you be trying to sneak into the very country that wants to arrest you? So literally, this is our national sovereignty is at stake. And y'all, I know you all took out the envelope before, but I'm asking you to invest in this fine organization for that reason, because our national sovereignty is at stake. The Family Foundation has been at the front lines of so many of these big issues that we're facing. And I can think of nothing bigger also as well. They've been at the front line on the education front. I was talking to Ann earlier, who's a retired educator, so thank you. But we were talking about what we've seen, and what I've seen in education. And Plato said the 2 most important questions for a civilization is this: who teaches the children? And what do they teach them? After the October 7th attack last year, I was invited by the Israeli government to visit. I went with the Attorney General of Argentina and the chief counterterrorism prosecutors in France and Germany and Austria. It was a small group of us. And they put us in a secure room and they showed us the actual footage of what was recovered. They haven't released it to the public because of respect for the families. G.K. Chesterton said that original sin is the only aspect of Christian theology that can be proved just by reading the newspaper. Folks, I saw hell on that screen. I saw evil unlike anything I've ever seen. And I had to go to crime scenes and I had to sit through an autopsy when I was a prosecutor. I've never seen anything like that. Hitler tried to hide what he was doing. I see that footage and then I go the next day to Berry, which is a kibbutz on the border of Gaza. And I walked into a little girl's room. It's probably 7 or 8. Her doll was at my feet, right in the doorway. And the bed was her return. She had tried to hide from the terrorists. And there's blood and bullets splattered on the wall. It's still there. You can still smell the death. 24 hours later, I'm back home at JFK waiting for my connecting flight to Virginia. And I look up at the screen, and what do I see? I see American college students marching with Hamas flags and Hamas slogans. And I realized we are at a time when we need moral clarity. We need complete moral confusion. And so that's part of the reason why you're here, is you realize you can't be on the sidelines. Not on education, not on our national sovereignty. We're at a state right now where we have an education system that is literally trying to tear down the foundations of what has made this country the last best hope on earth. And what happens when you move the foundation from a building? It crumbles. There's a saying in Oregon, you don't know how tall a tree is until after it's been cut down. I pray nobody ever says that about this country. I'm asked sometimes, particularly one in Southwest Virginia, what kind of name is Miyares anyway? And I would say, it's Southern. It's deep South. But I had a conversation with my mother actually earlier today. We were touching base. And she was asking me about my opinion about some of the lawfare that I'm seeing that's happening in the country. And she says, I'm seeing so much of the same tactics that I saw in Havana, Cuba in the 1950s. She said something to me that just chilled me. She says, I have no place else to go to. If America falls, I have nowhere else to run. Folks, we have nowhere else to go to. I don't know about you, but I personally think America is worth fighting for. I think our biggest problems as conservatives, our biggest challenge in many ways, it's not the media, it's not some of the leftism we have to see, it's ourselves. It's apathy. It's this feeling that nothing will change. And I know, at least for me, I was saying earlier, I feel like I'm living in C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man, right? The fact that you could say, no, men cannot give birth, and that's a controversial statement, that says all you need to know about where we are. But folks, we need you to get off the sidelines and in the trenches. I'm in there. Victoria's in there. But now it's time, if you love this country, if you think this is indeed the last best hope on earth, if anything that I have said has moved you, I'm asking you to get in the trenches with us. That's what we need. That's why I'm here. Because I believe in this organization. I've seen the results on the ground. But folks, they need resources, and candidly, they need you. You're here tonight because you're a leader. You may not think it, but you are, because you could be anywhere else tonight. So A, thank you for your leadership, and I'm asking you to step up. I'm honored to be in the trenches with you. I'm honored to serve as your Attorney General. But tonight I'm asking you to stand with this great group. Thank you all. God bless.
You know, it was interesting how he mentioned that the Biden administration is in the midst of basically threatening all of our public schools, that 90% of public schools could be affected by this on this transgender issue, that they could lose federal funding if they don't kind of kowtow to that agenda, that demand. And that's actually been in the headlines recently, with our Attorney General banding together with others across the nation and challenging the Biden administration in court.
Yeah, we're super happy actually right now it stayed, meaning that is not technically in force as the courts review this. So that's the good news, is not only was he willing to challenge, but they're seeing some success with different states challenging this around the country. But he makes such a good point, though, which is just that the liberals, this is their way of doing things. We find regulations and we abuse them in order to enforce an agenda that really should be something that comes through the will of the people, should be something your congressmen are voting on or your state legislature is voting on, not something that the deep state, the people that are, unelected bureaucrats are deciding at the regulatory level. So I think that's really important. The other thing that I thought was an interesting, since he brought this up, I'll just mention, he also, just talked about this catch and release program. This is not an issue we typically talk about here, but just this idea that immigration has gone unchecked. And since his talk, we've had this horrible death of a college girl from ODU in a car accident that was brought by somebody that should have been out of our country already, right? So so his point, the Attorney General's point in this talk was this catch and release is dangerous. And now we've had a Virginia incident again, where it's like, we have got to get control of illegal immigration because there are real harms for people that shouldn't be in our country. And it just, anyway, so he's just on point and so relevant with all of his comments.
Yeah, I could really have a discussion all day about what we just heard.
Yeah.
But I think just to sum up, it's interesting that he also said that even despite all these obstacles with what you just mentioned, with our nation's sovereignty at stake and just education, all of these things we're facing, woke media, whatever it is, he actually was challenging us that the biggest obstacle is ourselves.
Yeah.
The apathy that can be within ourselves when we start to say, we're not going to change anything, we can't win. Why don't you just take us out on that thought? Just thinking about that as we head into whatever's, waiting for us these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's just such a self-dooming concept that we would think, gosh, it's getting so bad, I don't want to do anything about it because it can't change anything. Well, it's going to get worse. And I really appreciate that he's trying to say, look, we absolutely are in these moments where action can make a difference and can turn things back around. History has pendulums. Things swing back and forth. And this idea that, somehow it's too bad to even make a dent, I think gets into people's heads, and it prevents us from being so much more effective. If we all actually believed that that our engagement made changes in outcomes, I think we'd have the numbers to change the outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when we're not showing up, we're not able to be there when a providential moment comes where we could make the difference. And I think of even in our history, like Washington's Delaware crossing, if he's not taking a risk or being there in that moment, we've lost that moment. And we just, sometimes it's just about showing up and being available. We can't predict when things are going to change, but we need to at least be there so they can, right?
Absolutely. You got to set yourself up for opportunity. If you're not doing the things that are necessary to be able to make change, then you can't expect that it's going to magically happen without you. But history We don't control the timeline. We don't control what God has, and we never know when God wants to jump in and do a miracle, but he often does them through human beings. So let's be there.
Let's be there for the
Let's
miracles.
Be a part of it.
All right, that's a great positive way to wrap up, folks. Thank you for joining us. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together. You can help by simply sharing our Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube, or if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or an audio version like that, just give us that 5-star review if you like what we're hearing. That helps us reach more people. We'll see you next time.